Hi everybody, welcome to Sprague Woodturning. My name is Jim. If you haven't been here before, this is predominantly a turning channel. Each and every week I show people how to make things on the lathe. This week we're going to be working with something I've never worked with before, and these are Magnolia pods. These were sent to me from, by Julie, so thanks a lot. She sent me a big box of these along with some corn cobs, which, you know, might be something cool to work with as well. So most of these have stems on them like this. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep the stems or cut them off. I did cut one open and it's over on the workbench, so I'll show you what it looks like on the inside because I wasn't exactly sure what I was getting into here. But these should make a really neat casting. So let's head over to the workbench and figure out exactly what we're going to do with these and the color epoxy that we're going to cast them with. Alright, so I just took these out of the fridge kiln. I wanted to make sure that they were good and dry. And as you can see, I mean, this is, I don't even think this is half of them, maybe a third of them. This is what they look like on the inside. They are rather woody, I will say, up the center. Kind of looks like a pine cone almost on the inside, if I get the lighting to hit that right. So yeah, pretty neat thing. We'll definitely need the vacuum chamber for these. But I do think that what I want to do is cut these stems off. I don't think that those stems are going to interfere with them going together. So probably the easiest way to do that is going to be on the bandsaw. These are, I might be able to snap them. Let's see, it doesn't snap off where I want to. Yeah. So after snapping a few of these stems off, I thought that it was probably best to just go over and cut them here on the bandsaw. Now these are coming up from the southern US, and I just want to make sure that to clean out as much foreign material that I can, just so that we're not eating up all of our tool edges while working with these. And again, thank you so much, Julie. I really do appreciate it. These are awesome. All right, there we go. Now this, let me measure how tall this is, because that's going to be quite a deep pour. So that's probably about almost 8 inches. Now I'm going to do the 8 inches, but of course, pretty much like all epoxies, you know, designer epoxy, you can get away with really deep pours like this. I can't speak for other brands. But, you know, based on volume, there's going to be a lot of volume in here. And that's really the issue when casting stuff as far as having thermal cracking is concerned. The larger the volume of epoxy in a smaller container, the more likelihood that it's going to crack. So keep that in mind when you're doing your pours. Speaking of that, let's mix some epoxy up. Deep casting epoxy to the rescue here. If you tried anything else, you are definitely going to encounter tons of thermal cracking. And of course, I typically do these castings as an overpour and I get away with it. Sometimes I get burned on it, but for the most part, deep cast is very forgiving as far as depth is concerned. I looked up the Magnolia flower, and I think magenta and white will go good in this to kind of replicate the color of the flower. At some point we're going to have to put a weight on this, and but you know, we might be able to put a couple of these in here before we need to do that. Yeah. This is probably going to take 6 liters. All right, I'll bring it back when I've got the other one mixed up. Yeah, a lot of epoxy. Here's another 1.5 liters. This is one of these times where I wish I had bought my freezer. Be able to throw it in there for 24 hours to keep it from cracking, but anyway, let's we'll see how we do here. But it's yeah, it's a lot of epoxy. This will bring it to 4.5 liters. Kind of surprised these haven't started to flow yet. This will bring it to 6 liters. There we go. So if you recall, Dwayne, I damaged one of Dwayne's eyes. So I got a new eye for Dwayne. That way we don't have to put an eye patch on him. Okay, this is the last one of magenta. What is that? 7.5 liters, I think, of epoxy. I'm not adding any more than this. Now the last thing that I'm going to do is mix up a smaller container of the crystal ice white, and we will add this at the end of the day, and hopefully we're going to get some kind of white streaking through this. Yeah, it's got a little bit of a magenta tinge to it, but well, it's going to be all mixed together, so it really doesn't matter. So for those who are familiar with this tree, they're probably going to say, well, that's not what a magnolia flower looks like. It's predominantly white. And you're right, it is. But I didn't think that this casting would look good with a predominantly white with hints of magenta in it. So that's why I kind of reversed the colors a little bit. I have done some research online, and some of the trees really produce really magenta color looking flowers. So that's why magenta is the dominant color in this casting, in case you're wondering. All right, that's full vacuum, and if you're wondering, that is about 27 inches of vacuum. You may have noticed this jump. There is a bucket stuck on the bottom of this bucket that I can't get off. So that's probably what's happening there. It may be squeezing and popping up. Anyway, I'm going to keep doing this for an hour, and I'll bring it back when we're ready to go into the pressure pot. That's been an hour and a half, so what I'm going to do now is release the vacuum, and we'll throw this in the pressure pot, and at the end of the day, I'll bring it back and we'll put the crystal ice white in this, and then hopefully it's not going to thermal crack. Well, I was trying a little experiment here. This is a battery blanket, and I had it wrapped around the deep cast, and well, I wasn't watching it. I'm working on the week before's project on the lathe, and yeah, I don't know if you can see the smoke coming off it. So if you want to thicken up deep cast, yeah, this is a way to do it. Not successfully, but yeah. So I guess I'm gonna have to mix up another one of these, and yeah, man, I don't know. I was getting close to doing the pour too. Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. I just wasn't watching it, and now I've got this massive mess, and it is so hot. Like, it is. All right, let me clean this up, and then I'll mix up another one. I might use Art Cast though. All right, I decided to go with Art Cast. I just measured this. This is at 58 degrees Celsius, so it's pretty warm. I've been wanting to do this experiment for a long time with Art Cast. Others have told me that you can combine them like this. So, well, I guess we're going to find out now, aren't we? I'm going to quickly get this pressurized, and we'll see you guys in 3 days, 72 hours. All right, well, good morning. I don't know how many days it is after the pour. 4, possibly, something like that. Epoxy feels really hard. And you'll notice that it hasn't really dropped off all that much either. Anyway, let's get Dwayne off of here and get this out and see what we're looking at. Look at that. Man, that's a big blanket. Well, you can see lots of that crystallized white in here, but yeah, I don't think we got the color separation that we're looking for. So unfortunately, I'm going to lose my plywood piece that's in there too. Yeah, don't see any thermal cracking. Can't wait to get into this. I think it's going to look really nice. So this, if you're curious, well, we'll call it 6 inches deep and almost 11 inches wide. Let's get some centers and get this on the lathe. Not going to get any better than that. As I always do when I'm working on these hybrid projects with epoxy, we're going to use the number 3 Hercules from Hunter Tool Systems. And again, the goal here is just to strip off the excess epoxy, get a bunch of those pods exposed, and we'll go from there. I don't really see the point in turning and casting and leaving it kind of when it comes out of the bucket. If you don't cut away some of the epoxy, then you're not really going to see a lot of those pods, especially in the very center of the casting, if you know what I'm talking about. So that's why, you know, you'll see me whittle these down a little ways, just expose, you know, in this case the pods, but in a lot of cases it's pieces of burl and in this kind of business. But this was a very difficult material to work with. Right there, was the same cutter from last week, but I found that when I got into this that there seemed to be a fair bit of sand still embedded in it, so it really did do quite a number on the carbide cutters. I did use up a carbide cutter while doing this, which typically I can get probably 3 projects out of, usually under normal circumstances. So once I get this whittled down a little more, we can have a look at it and figure out exactly what's going to be top and what's going to be bottom. In this case, it probably really doesn't matter all that much because you're working with pods. But anyway, they're a very, very cool looking thing, and you'll see the pictures here at the end. Man, that is a big blank though, isn't it? But you know, again, if you're having issues with casting and thermal cracking, give Designer Epoxy a try. You won't be disappointed. If you're new to my channel, I should mention that I am turning on a 20-inch General. This was a Canadian-made lathe. They are now out of business. I actually think they went out of business the year after I bought it, and that would have been, I think, 2012 or 13, somewhere around there. But I really like this lathe because it has left-hand threads on the outboard end. I have the left-handed curse, so it's more comfortable for me to work on the outboard end of a lathe than it is to work over the bed of the lathe. When you're pinched between centers, it doesn't matter if you're left-handed or right-handed. The turning will be the same. But when it comes to hollowing out the inside of pieces, of course you want your dominant arm to be on the back of the handle, and over the bed, well, it's going to be opposite for me. There are ways around that. You can stand on the other side of the lathe. If you have a removable or a movable speed control, which I have on this lathe, then it makes it a lot easier. This is variable speed, electronic variable speed. But I find moving it outboard is just way more comfortable for me to do. But I don't know of any other lathes on the market that have left-hand threads on the outboard end. So that's the main reason why I bought this lathe long ago. And for the most part, I am relatively happy with this lathe. But it does have limitations. The tailstock on this lathe is terrible. Absolutely despise the tailstock on this lathe. And if I could get a replacement tailstock, I definitely would. But right now, I'm just kind of trying to figure things out as far as what I'm going to be buying for machinery in my workshop and who I'm going to be going with. Right now, one way is near the top. I really, really would like a lathe with left-hand threads on the outboard end. So, I'll talk to them to see if they'll work with me on that. But I did briefly years and years ago ask them if that was a thing that they could do. I realized it would be an extra charge, and I was told no. So, maybe the best thing for me to do would be to buy the lathe and then take the arbor out and send it for, be recreated with left-hand threads on the outboard end. So, but that is in the future, and I don't even know for sure if I'll be going for one way, but it's definitely near the top of my list as far as upgraded lathes are concerned. Now, this is you would call this an industrial lathe, but it's only 20 inches over the bed, so you're losing 4 inches of height there, and it isn't as robust as, say, a one-way lathe is. And I want to get into making much larger things, and I think that I would really like to do that predominantly on the outboard end of my future lathe. But anyway, we're going to put a glue block on the bottom, so just using some 60 grit there just to rough up the surface, and that is a white birch block. So I usually let that sit for about 15 minutes. It probably doesn't need any more than that. Then I'm just going to use the Ellsworth gouge to cut it back, and then we'll reverse this and get the shaping this. In my mind, right off the get-go, I thought that this would look really good as an enclosed bowl, and that is the direction that I took this in. But it quite easily could have been a really nice hollow form, but I figured that, we did 2 in a row, so I don't want I figured that I'd stay away from hollow forms this week. So as you watch me shape this, I'll briefly talk about last week's video, and that was basically a lilac stump that was used as a gate stop in Alberta for many years. So didn't you know the gate stops make the coolest hollow forms? I didn't know that they did either, but it was a really, really neat looking hollow form. So thanks again, Warren, for sending that along. I really do appreciate it. But I will link that at the end of this video if you did happen to miss it. I realize that it's a busy summer and views are down. So anyway, I know that a lot of times people just they've got so much going on in their lives in the summer, and we actually happen to be one of them too. So, but anyway, I will link that at the end of this video in case you missed it. So besides this being quite an abrasive material, the other thing too that was pretty evident, and you'll see it here in a clip here shortly, is there was lots of little tiny micro cracks and voids where the seeds would have been sitting in these pods. So that was another consideration. Yeah, you can see them right there in the pods. And I mean, every pod virtually looked like that. So, we're definitely going to need to do an epoxy coat of some sort to correct that. But, if this was a pour that didn't have as much volume in it, that may not be an issue. So keep that in the back of your mind. If this pour had been only maybe 4 inches tall, and, we may not have had any of these issues. But, I like to push the envelope on this channel, which sometimes designer epoxy doesn't like, but I like to show how far you can push this epoxy, and if you push it too far, I like to figure out ways how to correct that. So yeah, sorry, designer epoxy. So if you were to give this a quick glance, you might think that they're pine cones or cones of some sort. But yeah, just pointing out, just thermal cracking just in the pod area. It's not actually in the epoxy per se. It's just, I think what happens is you've got these channels where the seeds were sitting. That epoxy gets down inside of there, and it just can't get rid of its heat, and then it just thermal cracks in that tiny little area. It's not a big deal. The epoxy coat does a really good job sorting this out, but it's one of those things that, I could have thrown this into the fridge, which I've done in the past a few times. I've also heard of others placing the casting into the pressure pot and then packing ice around the outside of it, the outside of the casting bucket that they're using. And they've had pretty good success doing that as well, so maybe I'll try that. But I want to get just a really small freezer, throw that in my casting room, and then put pieces like this in there for a day or two. And then, by then you probably won't need the pressure pot because it'll be partially set. But out near the top, yeah, there's some deeper ones there than you'd like to see for sure. Now, that may be me just being a little bit too aggressive and pushing too hard off the top. If you don't slow down your cut as you leave the wood, you will get lots of kind of fracturing like that, especially if you're working with epoxy. So that's one thing. As you leave the wood, make sure you slow down. Another way around is to put it like that, and you tend to not maybe get... The more you tilt it up, it's just lots of little spots that need to be filled. The more you tilt the cutter to the left, the less aggressive it gets. And then that way, it's really important to kind of smooth these things out and get rid of as much of this stuff as you can prior to even doing an epoxy coat. As far as using CA glue here is concerned, I would say no. There was a lot of cracks and little voids in this, so CA glue is on the out for this. It would only be fixed with epoxy. We're all set up and ready for coring. This is the one-way coring system from oneway.ca, and we're going to be using the Core Pro cutter from Hunter Tool Systems on this rig. Highly recommend this if you do any amount of coring. This will pay you back in no time. And of course, there's a link in the description below. Of course, we got the steady rest. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do much for tailstock support because it's overhanging quite a bit. So maybe right at the very end. Anyway, let's see how we do. It's not going to be a very large core, but hey, something is better than nothing. So yeah, this Core Pro cutter is absolutely awesome. As you can see, the RPM is 750. The only knock that I can see on the Core Pro cutter is the width of the groove that it creates. Other than that, I mean, this thing, take it from somebody that's done a lot of coring. I was really struggling with the one-way cutters that go on this rig. I love one-way manufacturing tools and lathes and their equipment, but the cutter was, I find, very difficult to sharpen and sharpen correctly. So this, of course, was mentioned to me, and I haven't looked back. This thing's awesome. Anyway, eventually, when I got in far enough, I was able to bring up tailstock support, and as you can see there, I just used compressed air to blow it out as it's happening. Because it's dry, it's not an issue. And there you go. There's a nice little bowl. Could be a little box. Could be a lot of things. But it would have been waste if we hadn't have cored it. So now mount it outboard. So again, since we're changing chucks here, things aren't going to be running true again. So you need to true these things up. That way you're not dealing with as much vibration. And again, a lot of people that have never worked on a lathe don't really understand that, the more out of balance something is, the harder it is to get a good clean cut on it. So that's why, it's preferred to kind of work with balanced pieces. And if you change chucks, well, then in all likelihood, you're going to knock that balance off a little bit. So it's important to true the outside up before you even move to the inside. And there's what we're looking at. Yeah, just lots and lots of voids to fill. Regardless of that, I really think that this is worthwhile. It's a beautiful, beautiful enclosed bowl. I really do think it is. So I tried to give you guys lots of different looks as far as so that you can see how the cutter works and how I'm holding the Hercules. Again, I've said this lots that, the Hercules is an easy transition because you basically use it like a gouge. If you can use a bowl gouge, you can use a Hercules. And there is a really large thermal crack in there. When it comes around again, we'll see it. Right there, yeah. So that was the only large thermal crack that I've seen. For those who are not aware, I will be doing a video series on the build of our new house. And last week the footings did get poured, and the material for the ICF foundation, that's insulated concrete form, have arrived along with a bunch of rebar. Now I'm doing this voiceover on Thursday, and we've just got the materials on site, but nobody's showed up to do anything. So I was hoping that it was going to be today, but I still haven't seen anybody at the site. So I don't know, maybe tomorrow, but we'll have to see. I'm really looking forward to getting some really cool footage on that. It should look really cool. And the ICF, if you've never seen it before, it's essentially like big Lego blocks. I'm going to put it all together and throw a rebar in it, and then pour concrete down inside of it. And it makes a really good insulated basement or house if you want to do a whole house. But anyway, nothing has happened so far with that as of this week, other than the materials being dropped off at site. As you can see, I have not bought any new equipment. I've been too busy making videos here in order to really dedicate a lot of time to it. A little bit of sign language to the camera. That's 1,000 RPM. Again, a great thing about projects like this, where the pods are all relatively the same size, and as long as they're packed in evenly, when the epoxy is poured in, it will run relatively true. You won't have a heavy side and a light side, so that definitely allows you to pick up the RPM. And for those who are not aware, I typically like to turn epoxy at around 1,000 RPM. That is not always achievable. It's all going to depend on what you're working with. But in an ideal situation, I don't know. Yeah, I'd probably go to 1,200 on this because it's not really that big. Another reason for these panned out views is to kind of show you body position. Right now, I've got the Hercules tucked, basically into my left side, and the scene just before this. And when you do that, it takes a lot of the strain off of your joints. I have had shoulder surgery on my right shoulder, but I try to whenever I can tuck whatever I'm working with into my side and sway on my hips. I find it's just so much easier on your joints. Like right there, that's all arm strength. There's not so much, you're not using your whole body here. So, and as long as you're taking light cuts, it's not so bad. But, a lot of times I'm in get her done mode. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, man, I feel like I've been pumping weights here all day because, I'm just feeling really exhausted. But tucking that into your body will really take a lot of the stress off your joints. And I highly recommend turning that way whenever you can. Sometimes you just can't. But right there, that one there is hard on your shoulders. So I did cut out a bunch of this footage. It's just very repetitive. One of the irritating things about making enclosed bowls is that the shavings don't clear like they ordinarily would with an open bowl. So you have to stop fairly regularly and clean things out so that you can actually see what's going on and get a look at things. But I'm leaning more towards enclosed bowls more as an art form than open bowls, and I just find that sometimes the closed bowl will give you kind of the semi look of a hollow form, but you can also use it for function. And for those who are curious, designer epoxy is considered food safe once it's fully cured. I think it's something like 21 days or something like that. And of course, Waterlux is in the same category. The only one that is not food safe is CA glue. And all CA glues are pretty much the same. Yeah, I was going along and my cutter just seemed to not be doing much of anything anymore, so I rotated it to a fresher edge. So pretty soon I'm going to switch out to the Badger Cub straight point tool. That's going to be coming up here in a minute. I just found that I could have stuck with the Hercules all the way through this, but in that little transition area in the belly of the bowl, the cutter was having a little bit hard time making contact, or maintaining contact. So yeah, that is the Badger Cub straight tool, and of course it's got that cutter that's kind of all the way around it for the most part, except for where it's being held by that thin little end. But it's a great little finishing tool to get into those little transition areas that ordinarily a gouge would have a hard time maintaining contact in there as well, depending on the grind, of course. But anyway, this has been a good addition to my toolbox, and I'm glad that I've got this one as well. Long, smooth, flowing cuts. If you look at the shavings that are coming off of this, they're not near as big as they are off the Hercules. So before you're moving into sanding, you might want to take these really nice fine cuts just to limit how much sanding you do have to do. Because we all know nobody likes sanding. And since I don't like sanding, I like to use these 3.5-inch dimple discs. These are fantastic discs. I've been using these guys for over 20 years, and I do highly recommend it. And of course, they do have an extensive line of sandpapers, not just the dimple discs. So we're going to sand from 60 to 180. Don't see the point in going any higher than that, especially since it's going to be all basically sanded off the next day. Look, it's even hard to get the the dust out of an enclosed bowl. Probably a vacuum cleaner would be a better thing for this. But anyway, once that's done, we'll be able to move on to our epoxy coat and bring this piece alive. Now, I haven't shown you any looks at it with the denatured alcohol, but yeah, I really like the look of this piece, and hopefully you guys do as well. This is 3 ounces of the Pro Series and a silicone barbecue brush. Now, when I'm using this brush, I kind of use it as almost like a squeegee. I get it on there, I push it into the surface, and then I try to squeegee off the excess, and that way you don't have tons of pooling inside the bowl and runs and sags on the outside of the bowl. So that's one of the things. And then of course I just finish it with a gloved hand, and this time I use the torch. Check that out. As soon as I can get better light here. Yeah. Lots of crystallized white. Now, can I say that it's kind of separated? Not really, but there does appear to be a lot more of it in this casting than previous castings. So, I don't know. The Magnolia pods are really cool. And, you know, I never was a real fan of magenta, but, you know, this thing's really growing on me. Or the color is growing on me, I should say. Yeah, you can see lots of crystallized white right there. Big streaks of it. So, you know what? Maybe it did stay separate. Anyway, let me know what you think. See you tomorrow for the first coat of, well, I should say for the sealer coat. We're going to do that tomorrow. Let me know what you think. Well, good morning. It is the next day, and things have filled in quite nicely, actually. I was a little worried yesterday. I know I didn't say it, but there was a lot of areas where it just didn't look good and looked like maybe some of the epoxy was going to delaminate from the pods, but it looks really good. Man, I would say like easily 95% of this is all filled in, maybe even more than that. But what we'll do is we'll sand this back and we'll get a look at it, and if any fixes need to happen from here on in, we'll use the UV epoxy, or UV resin, sorry. So ordinarily when I'm doing pieces like this, the next day I'm going to start sanding at 180 and then go up. Now even after I dropped it down to 120, and I've just found that it wasn't even really cutting back. Right down at the base there's a lot of epoxy. So anyway, I dropped it down to 60 grit, and then just to move things along here. And but after I got done with the 60 grit, yeah, there was still a number of voids and fixes that needed to happen. So I've sanded to 60 grit, and like I said earlier, I would say that probably 95% of the holes have been filled by the epoxy coat from yesterday, but you know, there's still a large number of them in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the UV resin. This is fantastic stuff. It really will help you move fast with your projects. And you know, I'm just going to squirt it in here and just kind of rub it all into the surface and fill some small little cracks. I mean, I don't know if the camera's going to pick that up in there or not, but it's a total different color. It's you know, it's brighter. There's another small little thermal crack out here at the rim. I mean, there's just on the outside, it's the same thing. So anyway, I'll put some of this in here. We'll rub it in, turn the lathe on, smooth it out. I'll quickly set it with the UV light. And then when that's done, I've got 2 of these UV lights. I'll take it over to the bench and then cure it with both these lights. And you know, I'll leave it on here for quite a bit of time, probably 10 minutes on the inside and 10 minutes on the outside, to make sure that this stuff is all fully cured. So I have used this as a finish. It didn't really work out the way that I wanted to, but you know, now that we're in summer, I might actually try it again here and stick it out in the sun and see if we get better results with it. Regardless, I've never used it in this manner where you complete the whole, or cover the whole bowl and fill in these little cracks. But you know, this does work quite well. One of the keys to success here is running the lathe in forward and reverse. That way you'll push it deep into any cracks and voids that are on the surface of the bowl. All right, so anyway, I'm going to pull this off the lathe, set up these UV lights all around it and cure this, and I'll see you in about 20 minutes. So it actually took about 40 minutes to cure this. It's so important that this cures properly before you move on. I did start sanding at 80. I didn't see the point to go to 60, and then I went, of course, all the way to 800. This worked absolutely fantastic, and I will definitely be using this technique again when I've got a lot of little voids and cracks to fill. That is the Triple E buffing compound, and I'm using buffs from the Beal buffing system, and I get them here in Lee Valley, here in Canada. And they do ship to the US if you're looking to try the buffing. Once that was done, can't forget that denatured alcohol. And initially when it comes off, yeah, that's the material that's left behind. Second pass, little cleaner. If you go again, clean. So here's what we're putting on. Universal tongue oil sealer from Waterlux. And just talking about the denatured alcohol again, the way that I judge on how many times I'm going to wipe the surface is how clean the rag is. If it comes off clean on the second pass, then that's usually it, and it usually only does take 2 passes. Well, there it is in its sealer coat. Turn that big ring light off. Yeah, look at the crystallized white in this. It's amazing. Awesome. That epoxy is just something else, and these Magnolia pods are pretty cool too. Not an easy thing to work with, but they do look cool. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you think. See you tomorrow for the first coat of original. I'm going to wipe this all off. Same process, we're going to use the Triple E buffing compound. I know some people are struggling with this method. You know what? Just keep going till you get an even look all over the surface. Then you're probably ready for the next coat to go on. And don't forget that denatured alcohol. If you're going to use this method, you have to clean this surface to get rid of that buffing compound, or it's really going to affect your finish. This is what we're going to be using, Waterlux Original Gloss. So you may have noticed that, you know, I just blew the piece off before I applied the next coat of finish. I don't always show that, but I always, before, even if you've walked away from it for 30 seconds, I always blow it off before I put the next coat of finish on it, or any finish on it. Well, it sure looks nice in the Waterlux here, the original. That might do it. We'll have to see. I'll see tomorrow. If it needs another coat, I will do it the same way as this one. But other than that, we'll see when we do the bottom. Yeah, man. Look at that right there. That has got to be crystal ice white. Anyway, let me know. See you when we're doing the foot. So after 2 coats of the original, we're ready to take the waste block off the bottom of this. And of course, my vacuum chuck is mounted outboard. That's just the way it is for me. You know, I prefer it outboard. If you're using your vacuum chuck on the inboard side, then of course you can put a little dot in the bottom of your waste block and then center it perfectly. It just helps with lining it up, but unfortunately, since I'm outboard, I don't have that luxury. So we're going to take the majority of this down with the gouge, and then of course I'm going to switch out to the Hercules to finish it. There were some, off camera, when I got done sanding this, I did see some little micro cracks in it, like there were in the rest of the piece. So I did throw some CA glue in those and then sand it down. And then, of course, I'll show some engraving coming up here shortly. But, yeah, there was just, I got some really bad chip out, so I did put a mortise on the bottom, which, of course, all my bowls on the bottom are slightly dished, concave, so that way, if there's a little bit of paper, or sorry, a little bit of something on the table, it's not going to rock. And I sanded it from 60 to 320. I decided to engrave on the bottom of this. We ended up going into that little pod. The word epoxy gets into that pod, so I had to do that a couple times. But other than that, I mean, I do like the engraving, but usually only when it's just on the epoxy. All right, well, that's going to do it for the video. Thank you so much for watching it. And, of course, special shout out to the members. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. Well, be interesting to see what you guys think about this. We'll definitely be trying some more of the the art cast and deep cast when we're looking for some color separation. We'll do some experimenting with that. And I did have to redo epoxy on the pod here. But of course, that's what the bottom looks like. The size on this is 10 inches at its widest dimension and 5 inches tall. And it's anywhere from a ½ inch to, I would say, 5/8 in thickness. It's got a really nice weight to it. If you've been around for a while, you probably know that I like weighted pieces, and that is certainly in this category, and it is for sale. If you are interested, send me an email to spraguewoodturning@gmail.com, and I will disclose the price then, in case this is a gift. Anyway, let me know. Don't forget to put designer epoxy in the comments down below to be entered into the next 3-gallon giveaway at 145,000 subscribers when we get there. Of course, that's only open to continental USA and Canada. Unfortunately, the rest of the world, we can't accommodate you. And so next week is going to be another burrow project. I don't know exactly what it's going to be, what the colors are going to be, but anyway, I think that it's what I've got in mind might be pretty cool, and it's something that we've done in the past, color-wise anyway. So anyway, that will be next week. So please come on back for that. Don't forget about Designer Epoxy summer sale they get on right now. Fantastic price. And of course, you can use my code as well. Code InlayJim. And if you're ordering the CA glue, please use InlayJim CA, and that will help out the channel. And of course, all my other sponsors are in the description down below, along with all the other links, the stuff you see me use here in the workshop each and every day. So please head on down there and check them out. All right, well, that's it. I'm out of here. Have yourselves a fantastic weekend, and hopefully we'll see you back here next week for another cool project. See you then.